Dear listener, hello. Welcome to another episode of The Quarter Hour. Today I'm out to lunch. What do you do when you want to talk sales? You go to lunch, of course. And my guest today will be Jamie Wood. G'day, Jamie. How are you?
Very good, mate. Good to see you up here in the River City.
I know, I'm here for like a few hours and I thought, what better thing to do than come and have a lunch with an old mate?
Yeah, well, it's nice. I'm actually in town at the moment. I'm normally travelling, as you are, a lot of
You
the
do
year.
do a bit of travel. Has the travel been curtailed somewhat with what's going on in the Middle East?
It has actually. I was in Saudi a week before it all started to go down. One thing you've got to admire about people up in that region, we've got clients up in Qatar and Dubai. They really have a high tolerance for that kind of stuff. They just press on.
Yeah.
They really do, and business continuity and all that is sort of paramount in those businesses. So you have to admire how good they are at that.
Mate, well, it's lovely to be up here in the River City. You've chosen a lovely restaurant. The lobsters are only $40 each. So, should we get to? What do you
Let's
reckon?
do it.
First of all, we should always ask, whenever you go to lunch with someone from sales, work out who's paying. Because the idea is there's a transaction being made. It's just a matter of whether you're selling to someone or they're selling to you. All right, I'll pay for today. How does that sound? I waited. I left like a half a second for you to pick up the tab.
Well, I hope that I'm delivering enough value to compensate for the lunch.
You definitely are, mate. Okay, so you've got a background in radio, and I want to kind of understand the current Kyle and Jackie O crisis under the guise of a salesperson, because I think often what we do in radio is we think about the issue, we think about the sort of the inner circle around that issue. So for Kyle and Jack, obviously it's the show itself. There's people involved who work in the team, there's the programming content team, but the sales team still have to walk out the door every day and talk to clients. So when there is a crisis in a radio station, what do you do as a salesperson first when you've got no answer, no information about what's coming?
It's a good call. I mean, it's funny, I was a sales director of ARN Adelaide in 2014 when Kyle and Jack came over. And as you recall at the time, that was a pretty big, well, I wouldn't say it's a crisis, but it was a big market reset in many ways. It was one of the biggest media resets that had occurred at that time in many cases. And there was a reverberation of that even in a market like Adelaide, because so much revenue comes out of Adelaide onto Sydney and vice versa.
Yep.
So the context here is that it's one thing to have, I guess, a crisis or a change of a breakfast show, but something like Kyle and Jackie O truly is like a big market shifting thing.
Yep.
So as a sales director, as a salesperson, the first thing you've got to do is actually stabilise the team.
Right. Okay.
And so that's really about looking at this psychologically and going, straight away, we're dealing with a situation that is maybe unplanned. We had no forewarning or foresight this was going to happen. So as a consequence of that, what information do we actually have that we can impart onto the team, and how do we create a level of calm that, despite the fact we don't know everything, we've got a plan to obviously share the information we do have and a plan for how we're then going to kind of tackle this situation methodically. So, the biggest thing you have to think about in this type of situation is, how do I stabilise the team?
Yeah, so the sales team, you've got to work out how to stabilise them.
The sales team.
Yep.
And it's funny, one of the things that's really interesting about radio in general that I always found is that even if you are a sales director, if you're a sales manager, or you're on the sales team, even if there's a programming change or a change of breakfast show or something like that, very often it's still a surprise to the sales team.
Yeah, right.
Because these things are very clandestine, right?
Yeah.
Like talent deals have to be under the cloak of privacy. It's very often that, you might be signing a new show with 3 people and one of the managers is holding out and we don't know the situation until the day before. So I can recall my time at ARN. I mean, we had a couple of breakfast show changes where the contracts and discussions had been ongoing for months, but the sales team were really only being notified that morning of the this show ending and a new show starting.
So absolutely no awareness. Just you get into work one day and all of a sudden someone says, "Guess what?"
It's been my experience that it is almost always a surprise for the sales team.
Yeah.
So that's always difficult. But what you then have to build is a set of protocols that you have in place for when that happens, right? So the biggest thing that I find people can do is quickly catastrophize the situation. The audience is going to go.
Yep.
There's so much business in my pipeline that's either tied up to some sort of integrated idea. This client only buys us because they love this marquee talent.
Yep.
All those kinds of things can start to come at you pretty quickly. And so the biggest thing you have to do is to sit down and really look at it methodically and go, well, first and foremost, we have to get on the front foot with our clients.
So don't hide behind the desk, get out there and talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, and the challenge for me is I often find, and I've had this experience too, even being in a programming team, is that because those decisions are held tight, and we understand why that is, I just wonder how much kind of like forethought had been done in the planning. So let's just say there was an absolute chance that Kyle and Jack weren't going to make 10 years. Now, ARN wouldn't say that publicly. Kyle and Jack wouldn't have said that publicly. They're all in. But in a risk management scenario, the board would have had, you'd hope, a plan B if it doesn't last. But I don't know how much that filters down into stuff ready to go. So the sales directors might be brought into that tent, right, and said, listen, we don't think this is going to happen, but here's our plan should something happen. Does that happen?
No, I mean, you'll get the occasional passing comment like, this talent would be a great succession plan for Kyle and Jackie O down the track.
Yep.
You know, and you can make a different inference from that. What you typically find, if you're really cluey, you can start to see some signals and you can detect some things that may be going a certain way. Right. And an example I'll give you is, maybe you're going into contract negotiations and you're putting in your show briefs and you are wanting to get some sort of integrated concept or partnership that's heavily built around a talent.
Yep.
And what you start to see is that slowly they start steering your briefs out of that show, or they start coming back, and maybe there aren't that many proactive ideas coming from show to the sales team to sell.
Or they're a bit more generic.
They're a bit more generic.
Attached to a
they're
personality.
modular.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. They can maybe be sort of more modular. So you might in hindsight be able to kind of go, oh, I can see why that was happening. But a lot of the time, you know, the thing that's really important, I think, is even when you've got like a golden goose style talent that is just one that is fundamentally transforms the whole station, right? And Kyle and Jack are that.
Yep.
Love them or loathe them.
Yep.
They were the goose that laid the golden egg for ARN, right? And I know many people that were there at the time that saw what ARN was before Kyle and Jack and saw what it was after, you know, in particularly the 5 to 7 years after.
Yeah.
There's no denial the impact that they had on that business commercially.
Yeah.
The one thing that made them unique, though, and I know I'm jumping around here, but the one thing that made them unique, obviously, was they weren't probably the most commercially friendly talent.
Right, yeah.
So often there were contingencies built around that already.
Okay, so in other words, if Kyle and Jack say no to this, or we don't get the answer we want for a response for a client, then we already kind of roughly know a path we could go instead.
Exactly, yeah. So it might be something like, we really want to have some integration with Kyle and Jack. Well, look, you can have live reads, but if we want to do anything contest-based, we've got to hook them into Drive. Yeah, sure. Or it might be that we look at like an intern, Pete, who's like a friend of the show, and let's leverage his profile and connection into that show, but actually use him as the vehicle, you know, to maybe sort of drive this more integrated campaign where we know he's going to play ball and we can control the message. There's also just that argument of the halo effect that Kyle and Jack had, which is they obviously had a massive impact on that radio station. The thing I would be worrying about there right now is that it's not necessarily what is the life without Kyle and Jack, it's what is the KISS brand without Kyle and Jack. What do you actually use as your key sales asset on those stations now when you don't have your marquee talent who really were, you know, I would imagine in all of the perception studies, that station really is them. Not so much in Melbourne, but certainly in Sydney.
Well, that's an interesting point about Sydney, because as we sit here today, they are still, until maybe next week, the #1 FM breakfast show in Sydney. Their weekly cume is 700,000, and I sit there and go, there are people who have bought in, clients have bought into the dream, and we know Kyle and Jack are a hard sell for some clients because of the brand safety, etc. But there are absolutely raving fans and get good results out of Kyle and Jackie O. So let's say you're a salesperson, you've done all the legwork, you've got someone into the Kyle and Jack environment, the show's not there, and you have to make a call to that client to say, listen, pretty much we don't know what's happening. How do you navigate that conversation? Like, are you just upfront and honest that we don't know, or what words do you think?
I mean, I would play that one with as straight a bat as I could, because I think the messaging would be something to the effect of, look, you know, this is nowhere near as salacious as the tabloids are making it out to be. Fundamentally, there is a significant contract in place. There were some circumstances that caused what we deem to be, you know, what was the wording they used for Kyle? It was an act of misconduct.
Breach of misconduct.
So, you know, there was something that we deemed to be a breach of those contractual terms, and we're going through the legal protocols. Now, obviously, because of that, I can't share anything else with you. The most important thing I want to tell you right now is to allay any concerns that we aren't going to be able to come to you, you know, in real time as we have more information. And, you know, here are some contingency plans that we've already pre-worked up, right? So the contingency plans that you would need to account for are, we go to the next survey and the audience has dropped in half. Okay, how are we going to put some things in place to ensure that we can make that audience up to you? And what are some of the things what are some of those steps we might be able to take proactively to do that, right?
So getting on the front foot's important.
Absolutely, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and let me give you the reverse of this, right? So when KISS 106.5, back in 2014, when it was Mix 106.5 in Sydney, and I don't recall the rating, but it would have been around a 4 to 5 share.
It's nothing really,
And Kyle and Jack were coming over. We were still trying to sell Kyle and Jack before they came over. And we were basically trying to say to clients, look, we'll trade off the old book,
Okay.
knowing that when Kyle and Jack come in,
Yeah. There's upside.
naturally you would assume it's not going to get any worse, right? That was the phrasing. And the market even still didn't buy into that. They were like, no, we'll just hold off until we see how they go.
Right.
So there's only so much you can sort of do, but a lot of it is just getting into a place where you can kind of negotiate those terms up front. So, some of the scenarios would be that, we have a massive under-delivery in the audience that you've negotiated off, in which case we need to find a way to, ideally we want to proactively see if we can almost compensate you and reward you for your loyalty now. So it might be, what are some key pieces of inventory that we have in the network that we might be able to proactively offer to you by way of just showing our belief in the partnership and wanting to kind of just get you to stick with us through this difficult time.
What about the reverse though in Melbourne? Because in Melbourne, many salespeople in ARN might think this is great news. I mean, it's not good news how it's happened, but I mean, they were going nowhere fast in Melbourne, and you kind of, depending on who you listen to, you think that they got what they got in terms of ratings.
Yeah.
So there's rumours of, Dave Cameron's in there now, he prefers local, would he put a local show in? But as a salesperson, you're sitting in limbo, right? You're literally sitting between, there isn't an answer yet, but we're hopeful the answer is going to be a better solution. Are you still having the same kind of conversations with clients at that point?
I would imagine in Melbourne. I mean, it'd be very enticing to sit there in Melbourne and sink the boot in and go, oh, how good's this? But it really does undermine probably what the sales team have had to be taking out for the last 12 months as their narrative.
Yeah.
So I would imagine if I was sitting in Melbourne, there'd be two dual strategies I would have been pursuing over the last 12 months. Number one is I would be leading with Christian as our absolute key marquee talent.
Right, yeah.
And I'd be spending a lot of time talking about gold, talking about that brand, and really leading with him as effectively kind of the hero product in the portfolio, because he is, right?
Yep.
In my opinion, if you're in that market. Simultaneously, I would need to have a really clear position on Kyle and Jack that might be polarizing, but it needed to be consistent, right? And I think that's, if I look back at ARN, not that I'm the expert, but if I look back at ARN, where I think they probably missed the mark a little bit in their messaging was they kind of wanted to have it both ways. We want to promise brand safety with Kyle and Jack, and they're going to play more ball, but also they're polarizing and it's radio gone rogue, and it's like, which is it, guys?
Yeah,
you have to pick a lane and stick to it. And I actually think if you had went and doubled down on the radio gone rogue, put this up against any other podcast that is doing millions of downloads every month, and tell me that this is less sanitized or more sanitized, or that, I think there needed to be some sort of a consistent line in the sand to go, we're going to double down on this is what the show is.
Yep.
And I think that allows you to actually have some really interesting dialogue in market with clients around, we know this show's not for everybody, but here's some brands that are really bold and really brave. That are investing in the show, and there are safeties and parameters around how their brand shows up in that environment, but look at the results they're getting.
Nice.
I think if you did that over time, but you just kept that same position, you would be in a much better position than trying to kind of, change the messaging up every 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, Mardo has turned up with his leaf blower right here on his
I reckon we might move inside.
Brisbane River. Well, let's go on and grab some lunch, but just to finish this up then, tell us about Boost. So Boost Media International, you really help media businesses boost their revenue, but how do you go about that?
Yeah, sure. So that's probably the spiel, really. We're in 18 countries, but we're headquartered in Australia. We're a revenue generation company. So basically what we do is we work with some of the largest, most successful media companies on the planet in 18 countries. We come in and run these large-scale programs, which basically help them quickly acquire a bunch of new clients, get them onto contract revenue and push the inventory they wish to sell. And primarily we work with everything from cinema, TV, out of home, digital, pure play digital, but radio is kind of the core of our business. It's where our business started, and those are the clients that I love to travel around and work with the most.
Nice. And the podcast, how's it going?
Yeah, so far so good. So we're into season or year 7 of Media Sales Mastery. So
awesome.
Started out as 5 episodes and turned into an ongoing thing when COVID hit. It was meant to be like a 5 episode induction style thing. But mate, it's going great so far. And I mean, I've had you on there. I think you've had the most episodes out of anyone. I think we've had you for 3 episodes.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
So yeah, all going very well there too.
Well, mate, we'll definitely get you back because there's always something to talk about in the sales environment. And I guess with my pod, what I'm trying to do is make sure people remember that there's more to radio than Kyle and Jack. I know they're the flavour of the month at the moment, but for sales, for PR, there's lots to talk about in terms of ownership and media mergers. So I want to kind of keep bringing out the big picture around radio because some of these issues are universal, even if they're just talked about because of current issues.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good point because you're absolutely right. The Kyle and Jack thing is actually a really good real-time case study, but for me, the utility you take from it which is I know what you're intending to do here, is if I'm sitting in a sales chair and I have this type of event happen, what's my playbook?
Yep.
So to me, I would kind of recap it as you've got to stabilise your team.
Yep.
You've got to get on the front foot with your message to market with what you do know.
Yep.
And ultimately, you have to just kind of play a very transparent, very strategic game of just keeping the clients updated as to what's happening and get creative, right? Well, the beauty of radio is it's a creative business. And I'll give you a really good example of a reframe. And I use this as a story, if you'll indulge me, because I think this is a good one. So when I was at 97.3 FM, we actually had the breakfast show at that time. I think it was in 2019. At that time, the breakfast show were terminated, and we brought back a new show. But there was a 2-week period where we didn't know who the new show was going to be, which was like hell on earth.
Yeah, right. Because everyone's asking you.
Everyone's asking, right? And so there was speculation as to who it was. There were reasons as to why the previous show was let go, etc. The amount of business that we had tied up in contract revenue that wasn't willing to close because we didn't have that show. And one of the main advertisers we had, the biggest risk was we had all of this stuff built around the breakfast show. It was McDonald's.
Right.
All this stuff built around the breakfast show. We're in the middle of a contract negotiation with McDonald's, and suddenly we need them to sign off on a massive partnership with no idea who that show is going to be.
Right.
And all of these ideas linked to talent. And you could argue that the right thing to do would go, well, let's see who the show is.
Yep.
You could go and say, let's go find a plan B. We just flipped it and said, well, do you want to be the launch partner of the new show? Right? Simple as that.
Yep.
And it's just a complete reframe of this is going to be a brand new show. There'll be a bunch of above the line marketing. There'll be a bunch of trial. Your brand should be
good time to jump
in that environment. It's a good time to jump on, and you can be our, our exclusive launch partner.
Nice.
So to me, that's the beauty of radio as a business, is that anytime you have a challenge, you can find a solution that's really functional but really novel. And that's what I think makes this industry so enduring, and what I love working, what I continue to love working adjacent to it.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Hey, the caviar's calling, so we should go inside and have it.
Let's do it. Thanks, Wade.
See you, mate. Bye. Jamie Wood there, host of the Media Sales Mastery podcast. Check it out. It is really good, and I have been on it a few times, and Jamie is very practical with this stuff. So now I've got to go and pay the bill for lunch. Dear listener, see you next time.